At this point, we're pretty much done with our workflow, and we want to move towards enabling data sharing from the results we have generated. So what we're going to do is look at the results from last time, and the data that we're going to want to share are these consensus sequences. Say we want to share these with GIS8 or GenBank or something like that. And a lot of the names that are given during the workflows aren't necessarily in the format that you need in order to data share things. So in this video, what we'll do is we'll discuss the batch renaming tool a little bit and show you how to use that. So first, I know I searched for it here, but pretend we haven't, and you could say rename, okay, choose batch renaming. And what this tool does is it can allow you to rename not only the top name of an element, but also the sequences inside. So actually back out for a second and say, let's look at this 62 here. You could see the name inside is different than the name. So the name of the sequence in this list is different than the name of the sequence list. And these sequence lists could have multiple sequences in them. So you could rename both the sequences inside the list and the sequence list itself. So let's try to do that with our results here. So, okay. We can select all these. Actually, let's close this one. Selected all those, select batch rename. Let's get rid of that. We'll grab all these. Here you have options to exclude or include different files based on a name. We're not going to use that. And then here is where we can rename elements, or we can rename sequences in a sequence list. And both of these are pretty much the same format. So what we're really interested in doing is renaming the sequence inside the sequence list. And that is going to be right here, rename sequences inside the sequence list. And you click next. So there's lots of ways that you can rename elements. You can add text to the end, you could add text to the beginning, you could replace the full name, you could replace part of the name. What I'm going to cover today is I'm going to say, you know, when I started with this project, the first element in my names was the identifier that I want incorporated into the spheres consensus name that they use. I'll try to add a link to one of these videos someplace where you could see those standards or best practices for sequence naming. So I'm going to try to prepare these sequences in that naming scheme in preparation for concatenating these consensus sequences for submission to something like GIS8 or GenBank. So the first thing I want to do is within that sequence name, I want to delete a lot of the suffix off of the sequence and just keep the beginning. And I know this beginning part has 11 characters to it. So if I say replace part of the name, and you know, you can bring up the help element here, and this is not a trivial section of the tutorial in learning how to use these regular expressions. So I'm just going to just show one example, but I'd recommend that you read up on this and learn a lot about how to rename things using these functions, because it is really powerful. What I want to do is I mainly just want to replace part of a name, and then I want to append information onto the front and onto the back. So right here they give an example. If you would like to keep only if you'd like to only keep the first 4 non-white space characters, use this from and to. And they have an example here from the from and to, and they talk about the nomenclature. This caret being the start of the line, this being non-white space. This 4 right here is going to represent the 4 characters, and the dot asterisk represents everything else, and then 2 with the $, it's the first group from field, which is that group in front of the period. Okay, so let's try to do that. We want to keep the 11, so we want to replace part of the name, and essentially we want to keep this first element, these first 11 characters. Okay, and we have checked interpret replace and with as Java regular expressions. So if I say finish, and yes, I know, this can't be undone, so we say yes, and this happens very quickly. So before, you remember when we opened up this first sequence, it had a very long name, Now when we open it up, it renamed the sequence element inside with just those first 11 characters, okay? So we're not really concerned about what these, the name of the list is. What we're concerned about is the name of the sequence inside of that list. Now, I just showed you how to keep part of it and trim off that back end. What we're going to do is 2 more steps. We're going to batch rename, add those same elements in, and we're going to add something to the beginning. Now, with some of the best practices with spheres, you have this /. We can't use forward slashes in some of these regular expressions, the way this is set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an underscore instead, and then later on when we create our consensus list, concatenated consensus list, we will replace those underscores with /. So we want to rename sequences in the list, and then we want to add to the name. At the end, we want to add 2020 because the sphere's ID will end with a /2020. So let's do that. And if we look at that first sequence now, we can see 2020 has been appended on the end. Okay. And we'll do one more batch rename. Brought everything over. Next, and now we once again the elements, and we're going to add something at the beginning. And at the beginning, what we're going to want to add is USA, and then the sphere's guidance has a /, and let's say this is I'm from Colorado. Let's say this is sequences coming from Colorado, and let's say this is a Colorado lab. And dash. So essentially what I'm doing is going off of this guidance. I can bring it over here now. There's a GitHub page. Here's the address up top. The CDC Gov GitHub page with SARS-CoV-2 sequencing. This is the format they want you to use. So here you have the country, and then a /, and then the state, lab, and sample. We already have the sample ID in there, and we've also put in the 2020 at the end, and we used an underscore to be replaced later with a /. So using that guidance, we have the USA, we have the underscore for the /, and the Colorado lab, and then dash. So let's try this. And if we open up one of these, you can see there it is, US, Colorado lab, SRR. Okay. And that's where we want to be right now. So the next video what we do is show how to make a metadata file real quick, and then how to concatenate some of these consensus sequences based on that metadata.